Really excited to spend the day basically talking about on-shelf availability. We'll mention a little bit later, but yeah, it seems like we've only been doing this for a couple months, but we've said since May. That's kind of amazing. We've had a lot of guests on, had a lot of podcasts. We've got our on-shelf availability page for people to refer to. But today we're going to do something kind of unique. We're going to actually do a virtual summit. A lot of people love to go to summits and breakouts and all that kind of stuff. The challenge is there's sometimes two or three things going on at once that you can't all get to because of other obligations. So this will be a virtual summit where we're allowing both supplier and retailers to join this summit free of charge. And we've got, I think, some of the best solution providers out there that are in the on-shelf availability space. And we'll get into more of that later, but Matt, we're going to give this a shot. We're pretty excited about this potential plan and format. So today's goal is really just to kick off the session, and I'm going to do that with my good friend Emil Martinez. So that's kind of, we're ready to get started.
Well, we're glad you're here. And Mike, so many folks who have been following your group are very familiar with who you are. But why don't you start off by giving an introduction? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you. So my name is Mike Graen. I have spent a career working in the kind of retail and CPG space. And I've really been focusing on couple different areas. But I started out with Procter & Gamble. Spent 25 years with Procter & Gamble. It's actually where I met my good friend Emil here. We'll get into more of that here in a second. But spent 25 years at Procter & Gamble, and 20 of those 25 years was working up against the biggest customer we had, which was Walmart. And you'd love to say, let's go build a business together, but it was really kind of a negative, kind of confrontational and transactional situation that we really wanted to create a strategic partnership. So they sent an IT guy down to work with Walmart. I spent 25 years there. Got to do a lot of things with connecting solutions like emails and putting things on EDI versus fax machines. Believe it or not, Emil, you probably laugh at that, but we literally had all of our purchase orders and invoices were on fax when I first got down there. Got to be very actively involved with Retail Link. I actually worked inside of Walmart for about a year working on Retail Link, which was a really, really good time. And then in 2003, we got involved with Walmart on some technology called RFID, which we'll spend some time talking about today. But I did that for about 25 years or so. And then I left and went to Walmart, and I was working on all things on shelf availability related, RFID, shelf scanning robots, algorithms, all kinds of different things. Left Walmart, I guess just a couple of years ago officially, because I was under contract with them for a while. And now I'm working with other retailers, solution providers, and CPG companies on shelf availability.
Yeah, great stuff, Mike. And Emil, you and I'm amazed have not crossed paths in the years that we've both been in the Walmart supplier community. Maybe we have and just don't realize it. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm amazed as well, Matt. You'd think we have at least chewed some of the same earth over the course of the last 25 years for sure. So my name is Emil Martinez. I have been in the sort of the retail industry space for the last 35 roughly years. A good chunk of it on the syndicated information side, and the last almost 10 years on the consulting side of the space. So the last 9.5 or so years, I've been with TCS, one of the largest, technology and systems integrators. I lead the consulting organization for the retail segment globally for TCS. Prior to that, I was the president of IRI Retail globally. And prior to that, I was with now the second half of what now has become Circana, the IRI NPD combination. And then about a 10-year stint with Nielsen, which is actually where I met Mike, originally as I was sort of transitioning to UCCnet, which was part of what's now GS1. So I've kind of spent, a career in and around the information services space, but very tethered to retail, and in particular, tethered to how retailers and consumer packaged goods, or FMCGs, sort of interoperate, how data is at the intersection of that process. And in my mind, on-shelf availability and the data related to it is just the next evolution or the next iteration of where data and opportunity sort of meet.
Yeah, great stuff. Listen, I've got some questions to sort of guide each of you through this conversation for our guest. Emil, I want to start with you. Talk about the world as you see it. Talk about sort of the status of the retail industry broadly. Talk about some of the trends that you're seeing, and sort of your opinion broadly about the current state of the industry.
Sure. So, I think the industry is in, kind of a transition. A lot of folks throw around the term transformation, and there's certainly a lot of that going on. But I see it kind of as transformation is really kind of the combination of transition and modernization as they meet each other. So you see this sort of fusion of things going on. So if you think about, we talk heavily about omni-channel, right? Omni-channel really is just the fusion of the physical and the digital world. So call it the physical store and the e-commerce capabilities, bringing them together in a synchronized fashion so that they can operate with one face. I like to talk about, how you think about Amazon, today, and we're all so tethered, to folks like Amazon and Walmart and, and the ability to leverage their online presence and so on. And the interesting thing about it really is that both of them are really just embracing what Montgomery Ward and Sears did 100 years ago through their catalogs. It's a digitized version of the world. And then you sort of layer around that. So, what's happening around the industry that's trending are, things like enhanced data sources, things like master data management, things like generative AI or AI in terms of new ways to leverage data, sort of in a bigger, better, faster, stronger fashion. So at the end of the day, the trends all kind of go to the same place. It's how do you get to the customer, at that zero moment of truth, whether that's physical or digital, in a fashion that you're in the best informed fashion to have what they want when they want it, and very importantly, that it's available to them when they want it and where they want it within the supply chain, whether that's physical last mile fulfillment to their home, or whether that's physical fulfillment in terms of pickup or in store, shopping and experience. At the end of the day, it's all about the customer.
Yeah, Mike, same question to you. You've certainly seen an awful lot of change in your 40 years in the industry. Talk a little bit about the world as you see it.
Yeah, first off, Emil, for all the people that you just dated, you're gonna have to tell them who Montgomery Ward is. I'm just. We got a whole bunch of people that are going, who? Yeah, I think same thing. So here's my big takeaway. People have more choices than ever. You have a device in your hand, which was basically now going to get you the product you want. Brand loyalty is key. People want what they want. And the retailers are struggling, in my opinion, to keep up, because I'm not going to be loyal to I'll just throw a few names out, Walmart or a Best Buy or a Target, if Amazon has it and nobody else has it. I'm going somewhere else. And I've got this quote. So the bottom line is, it's people are going to find what they want through whatever avenues they want, and retailers are going to pay the consequences if the stuff's not there. So I've got a slide here from Doug McMillon. I love Doug McMillon. He is extremely good at putting things real simple, but he had this quote, and Sam Walton had a similar quote. Doug McMillon, for those of you who don't know, is the president and CEO of Walmart stores. It's really simple. If you're not meeting the needs and wants of the customer, you're done. There's a lot of loyalty there, right? And he lives by this. And here's the other thing he lives by. He lives by, and he may have changed this since the last time I talked to him, but he has a copy of his phone. His screenshot when he first picks up his phone is this chart. It is a series of, from 1950 to 2017, who are the largest retailers, top 10, okay? And I'm not going to make any obvious claims, but Sears was the biggest for a while. Walmart then took over, and guess what? Sears is now gone. So once you grow the channel and you are on top, when you start sliding down, if you're not meeting the customer's needs, you're done. And so Doug has this really good way of keeping it real simple. It's all going to be about the customer. It's got to be about the associates who are taking care of the customer, et cetera. So my perspective, that hasn't changed since the first store opened. What has changed is the fact that we all have mini computers in our hands 24, 7 days a week. We're going to get the products we want. We don't have a lot of loyalty to the retailer, but we do to the product. So retailers, are you measuring what you've got and where is it located so you can meet them needs? Because if not, they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, great stuff. Emil, question for you. This summit is really all about people, processes, and technologies that are improving on-shelf availability. Talk in terms of each of those three things, and what are the most important? What are driving the most change right now as you see it in terms of people, processes, and technologies?
So, I think, two things are affecting it. And to what Mike just said, and to Doug's quote, the reality is if you don't meet the customer where they are and with what they want, you're done. Right. So in stock availability is critical path. So, significant people, process, technology investments around, understanding really three aspects of this. One, being really clear about what the item is and how you're positioning it, what problem sets, how you can query it, how you can, in essence, meet the customer's experience. So live where they are. If they're Googling for something or, searching for something on your space, that your master data doesn't serve that query in a fashion that it gets you to it efficiently, you're done. Secondly, if your supply chain isn't clear about what you have and where you have it available to them, or if by chance you think you have things that are not there and they get purchased, and you then disappoint the shopper by, in essence, having them come to pick it up and it becomes substituted, or you come to pick it up and it's not physically in the store, or it gets cut from your order, or even worse, it's you actually have it, but your systems aren't precise enough to be able to let the customer know that you have it, you've lost that sale potentially forever, and potentially lost that customer to come back. So, that's sort of the second piece of the puzzle. And then the third piece of the puzzle is sort of how do you enhance those things? So it's not just about the systems and the data. It's about ensuring that you have the mechanisms that give you the sensing ability to understand what you have and where you have it. So the last moment of truth, physically in the store, the biggest challenge, I think, has always been knowing what's physically in the store at any point in time. And we've implemented systems over time, computer assisted ordering and, those kinds of things. And we've dabbled with RFID, and in some retailers, they've embraced it heavily. In some cases, we've embraced robots to try to understand physical compliance and done a good job in those areas. But at the end of the day, I think it's this constant journey, toward really understanding what's in the store, what's available, in what location it is, and how do I make it the most efficient experience possible for the customer to get from point A, which is I desire X or I need X, to I now know where that item is from my limited consideration set of retail partners that I'm looking for it in, to I now have it physically on my person, and I can leverage it however I saw it in the shortest possible time. Everything from I order it now and it gets delivered to me in within an hour through some of those services, to I ordered it now and I'm going to go pick it up, within an hour or so. What's that short possible window I can get that fulfillment model to operate so that the customer says to themselves, everything is available to me sort of in a ubiquitous fashion and on demand.
Yeah, great stuff. Mike, availability, formerly known as in stock, is something that the industry has been wrestling with since the earth cooled. Certainly in my 35 years in retail, we've been talking about that. And a lot of folks will say, retail is such a simple business. Why are we still struggling with this? And on the other hand, the business has gotten all kinds of complicated in the last decade, especially. Talk in terms of on-shelf availability, talk in terms of how things have changed and why it is that it still continues to be top of mind for the leaders at every retailer.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different reasons. First off, just to take an item, any item, I've got a pair of glasses here, okay? To be able to get all the raw materials, the screws, the glass, the metal, the rubber, all the pieces that go in a pair of glasses, to manufacture that together and then seamlessly share that from manufacturing through distribution, through a warehouse, to the back of a store to get it on the shelf. You think about all the things that can possibly go wrong. There's a lot of them, right? And by the way, it's usually the last 100 yards of the toughest part, right? Getting it to the building is usually the easiest part. I think that's the first one, Matt, is it's just a challenge. I think it was the day the first retail store ever opened up, and it will be the day the last retail store shuts down, that this is going to be an ongoing problem. Problem is people talk, and I'll correct. I'm not going to correct, but let me just talk to Emil for a second. In stock is fairly easy to measure because it's how much do I have and how much do I think I sell. The problem is that doesn't accurately reflect whether that product's on the sale. So a lot of people say, hey, we're in stock is good. We got 12 and we think we'll sell 5, so we're in good shape. Well, the reality is the on hand in the store is probably only about 50% accurate anyway. On hand accuracy is a big issue. That's why a lot of retailers are going to technologies like RFID to fix that. And the daily demand is a forecast. So I got 2 numbers that I know are wrong, and I'm using them to measure what do I have available for the customer. The second one, which is on shelf availability, is it available for the customer to purchase? Is it available in the store? Is it available online that I go and pick up in store? Otherwise known as buy online, pick up in store, or BOPUS. Is it going to be available to me? I did my own little survey, Matt. I think you'll find this interesting. There's a lot of statistics about the cost of this, et cetera, but I ran my own little statistic on LinkedIn, and I ran it over a couple of weeks, and I thought this was fascinating. These are retail professionals in general. Tell me about your on-shelf availability issues. Yeah, I spelled availability wrong. It still bugs me. But anyway, 30, 44% respectively said, okay, but too many out of stocks or out of stock, right? So the problem has not gone away. It's still out there. The question is one of the things we'll talk about later is, how do you measure on-shelf availability? It's hard to measure. It's really, really hard to measure. We'll talk about some of that stuff. But number one, it's a very difficult challenge. Number two, if we don't have retailers and CPG companies actively measuring their on-shelf availability, not their in-stock, their on-shelf availability, then how in the world do you know how you're doing? Okay. Everybody measures labor and all these things. If you went to a retailer and said, what's your on-shelf availability? They probably say, well, our in-stock is 12 or whatever the number happens to be. That's not what I asked you. What's available for the customer? And you probably won't get a really good answer. So to me, that's the biggest challenge is you can't measure it real effectively. And it's hard, but it's something I think is critically important for the industry.
Yeah, good stuff. Emil, back to you. Given your background at IRI, at Nielsen, and at TCS, what are some of the current focus areas regarding data sharing across the retail supply chain? And what are some of the implications of that sharing?
So, it's an interesting journey. The whole data sharing, whole data aggregation, space has continued to evolve. So I started in the space in 1989, long time ago, pre-laptops, for those of you that were not understanding Montgomery Ward, earlier as a reference. So lots of evolution in terms of data processing capability, data availability, data cadence, meaning what was the update, and frequency available of new insights. And where things seem to be trending right now is towards more of a data sharing model, but in a monetized fashion. So virtually every retailer is saying to themselves, like aggregators have said for years, the money isn't necessarily in the process. The money is in the insight that drives the process. So, where historically it's really been about share, and volume and the related kinds of things around how a product is moving, from retailer to consumer packaged goods and out to consumer. Now we're trying to measure everything from, the pulse of inventory, sort of supply chain inventory status, to on-shelf availability, which is, in my mind, an enormous emerging opportunity to monetize for retailers, through third parties. I would suggest using a third party rather than trying to, be a data organization themselves. Lots of opportunities in those areas, but we're at an inflection point where they're not quite fully evolved. We got a little bit of piece of this and a little piece of that, and some real opportunity here and some opportunity there. But unlike, sort of the POS, or consumer panel data sources that have become, relatively available and somewhat commoditized. These are really at their infancy. The opportunity for, CPG firms to have insight into what on-shelf availability, per what Mike had just described in terms of the differences between in-stock and on-shelf availability, available for sale in a near real-time environment where they can start to make trajectory changes. We're right in the middle of, sort of the busiest time of the year for retailers, from December to, call it, February 1st, right? The massive, business between, Super Bowls and holidays and all the kinds of events that drive, significant change. If there's ever a time of year where understanding what's available for sale and connecting the consumer to that process, this is the time of year. This is when the game is lost, or to Doug's quote, if you're not meeting them where they are, you're done, right? So the opportunity to take that data, push it into the process in a fashion that makes everybody bigger, better, faster, stronger, makes the CPG sharper, makes the retailer sharper, is a massive opportunity, a huge inflection point for the industry that I think is emerging. We're getting there. I think we're starting to get reasonable sort of bobblehead doll alignment. Everybody's bouncing their head up and down saying, yeah, we got to do this. But I'm not sure it's really come to fruition in a point where, folks have adjusted their sort of the people and process approaches, to how they're consuming it, operationalizing it on a daily basis. But in my mind, that's where the opportunity lies, and the implications of it are massive.
As I mentioned at the kickoff of this conversation, Mike started an on-shelf availability small group with us about 18 months ago, a year ago this past May. And that small group is not so small anymore. And the reason for that is because Mike has been hosting a lot of great conversations, sort of reinforcing the importance of on-shelf availability, as well as talking about some of the different techniques that companies are using to measure it. Algorithms and audits and shelf scan robots, RFID, et cetera. Mike, talk about the group. Maybe a little bit a different twist than you were expecting on this question, but talk about the group. Talk about why OSA remains so important, which you've already sort of alluded to, and then touch on each of those techniques for measurement.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. Let's just go back. Why is this even important? And then how do you measure it? So we all basically said on-shelf availability is important. Why? Well, Doug already said if you don't meet the needs of your customers, there's no loyalty there. Just to build on that, here is a chart that McKinsey put together. This one was interesting. For those people who tried to go in and buy products, 62% of them could not at least purchase one of their items. That's 62% of the people are disappointed every shop. Not of every item, but at least of an item. Of those 62, 39% switched to a different brand. So in that environment, if I'm P&G and it was out of stock, I moved to Unilever. P&G lost in that situation. Number two, they switched to a retailer. So 32% of the time they went to a different retailer. Say, forget this. I'm bringing out my phone. I'm using the retailer's Wi-Fi to order from Amazon. That's the ultimate slap in the face. The retailer actually helped the customer to buy something at a competitor. 13% waited and 16% just gave up. So the problem is real, right? So how do you know what you have and where is it located, et cetera? We've already mentioned that on-shelf availability is important. How many retailers can deliver a chart that looks like this? This is on-shelf availability in a retail store, and I'm measuring to make sure that my goal is 95% on-shelf availability. Because, by the way, nobody can be 100% because nobody could afford that. It would be astronomically expensive. But 95% is a pretty good goal, and the more you could push that north of that, that's good. But who's measuring saying, I'm not meeting target, or I'm the target, not target the store? This is the kind of stuff you need to do. And where you're not meeting goals like sales goal or ROI goal, et cetera, where you're not meeting target, you go and do plans to meet target. And Emil and I are funny. We've been in the whole data sharing business a long way. One of my favorite quotes, I think, Emil, you came up with this, maybe we came up with it together, but a number by itself is meaningless unless you compare it to something. So somebody says, I'm 15% higher than I was, I'm 15% increase. What? I don't know if that's good or bad, right? So this compares a target, which is 95%, to how you're doing, Now, how in the world do you get these numbers? Because I just said you can't use your internal systems, which is how much do I have versus how much I'll sell. There's a couple different ways to do that. One is algorithms. And I'll cover these really briefly, Matt, because I think the purpose of the day is really to cover this in more detail. But I got an item that's selling 12, 16, 15, 15, 12, 11. All of a sudden it goes to zero, or two items that go to zero. I can't tell you anything, but I can almost predict that product is no longer available on the shelf. Okay. It's not on the shelf because you don't go from selling that many to zero, unless there's some kind of seasonality thing. So algorithms are a good way. And obviously you send retail coverage like an Acosta or a Crossmark or Advantage in to look at that. They go, yep, it's not on the shelf anymore. I put it back on the shelf. And then you measure this thing, which is after they made that intervention, we are now measuring what's called recovered sales, which is I took an action, I got it back on the shelf, it took off again. Those algorithms can actually measure on-shelf availability for you every single day. Secondly, is there's companies out there, this happens to be one called Field Agent, but there's going to be companies out there that we will talk about here in a second that will do in-store audits. They will literally take customers, shoppers, if you will, go in stores and collect information in the store. That can help you to say, is it on the shelf or is it just in stock, which means probably it's in the back room. This is one of the projects that Emil and I are working on. This is a Badger robot. This is a robot that literally goes in the store, undocks, and autonomously goes and scans the shelf. You see it turn the light on, and it's basically scanning the shelf and telling you what's available, what's not available, what are the out of stocks, what are the incorrect items, what are the pricing issues. So shelf scanning robots play a big role. RFID clearly plays a big role. It literally allows you to count things extremely quickly and be able to tell you exactly what you have on the sales floor for a customer. Other people use this. This happens to be an example from an online shopper that this young lady is actually purchasing customers' products for a customer. If they find it, they scan the item. If they don't, they scan the label and go, nil pick. I don't have the product. And the last one I want to share is fixed cameras. All right. So fixed cameras, shelf edge cameras that do that. So just to set up, Matt, the day that we're going to have here today, we've got a bunch of people. We've got two companies. One is called BOPS and one's called Retail Insight that really have a specialized capability to do forecasting and to do algorithmic kinds of opportunities, especially if you have a high velocity items. These are items that you definitely need in your toolbox. For things that are more situational, Trax Retail is going to be sharing later how their Trax system actually shows the ability to be able to see what's in the shelf using their Trax platform, which is an in-store data capture. We've actually got the top three, in my opinion, folks who are doing shelf scanning robots. Badger, Brain, and Simbe are all going to be on later on today, talking about their solution and being able to provide you updates on how their solution can work. We've got Williott and Barcoding that are both, experts in the low frequency and high frequency RFID space. That definitely would be great contacts for you if you're interested in more about RFID. At the date of this recording, we do have SES and Magatag also going to be doing fixed cameras. Now, just to be clear and be transparent, we're recording this in December. Some of the folks that we just put on the screen with some of the providers may change, or we may add some folks to it. So don't be surprised if that doesn't match up with the rest of the agenda. But for right now, Matt, these are the ones that we've got for the rest of the day. And it's going to be exciting to have them be part of this conference.
Yeah. Yeah, so excited to have so many of those solution providers stepping up to sort of share their story, talk about their capabilities. Emil, back to you. Give us a little bit more, insight into why product availability is so important right now in the retail industry from your own perspective.
So from my perspective, and having been around the industry this long, for those of you that have been in the industry or in the industry, you fall into this pattern. Everything becomes a new experience and observation. You walk into a store, you shop online, you sort of gain this perspective. You're part industry participant and part consumer. So you're sort of shaped by your experiences. But in my mind, it falls into three buckets. It's critically important to the shopping experience. So, each of us, I think, as we embrace, our purchase behavior, we have a consideration set for each of our areas. There's a set of retailers who, when we have a specific need, we look to 1, 2, 3, maybe it's 4 or 5 at the max, that we see as the predominant solution set for whatever that problem is or that opportunity is we're looking for. So making sure that shopping experience is easy, clean, capable is affected by whether the product is in stock and available. At the end of the day, the shopping experience a disappointment if I go to one of my key consideration sets and they don't have that product available for me. It's now complicated my experience. The second piece is perception. If it happens enough times, I likely change my consideration set. As Mike, showed the slide that Doug uses that shows retailers over the course of time. There's a reason that evolution occurred. And that occurred because over the course of time, shoppers' perception changed about who their consideration set was and where they were going to spend their dollars. So in my mind, if you're not on shelf and available, you are changing the perception of the shopper because I can no longer fulfill my needs simply and easily from that perspective. The second piece is, it drives the future thought process. So if I'm a retailer and I want to be on that 2030 to 2040, decade of who the top shoppers are, on-shelf availability in my mind, whether that's physical or digital, or the fusion of the two, which I obviously is where we are. Some folks call it digital, fusing the two words together. At the end of the day, the synchronization of that thought process is the difference maker, or at least one that's within your control to put you in a position to be on that list of retailers that are excelling, in the next decade and the decade after that. The moment you lose that point of contact with the consumer, start to lose the consumer. Doug referred to it as you're done. Let's take that done and connote what that really means. What that really means is me as the consumer, you as the consumer, the shopper, stop going to that store to fulfill your needs and you go somewhere else to fulfill those needs. That's the death knell for any retailer, whether they're physical or digital. When the shopper now considers you irrelevant, you're out of the game. On-shelf availability, the availability of product for purchase and for fulfillment or consumption is the game. It's that zero moment of truth, whether you want to think of that from a marketing perspective or from a fulfillment perspective. At the end of the day, that zero moment of truth is the game. If you're in stock, you've now fulfilled an opportunity for a shopper. If you're out of stock, you've now disappointed them and made them go somewhere else.
As we wrap up this conversation and invite folks to go and check out some of the capabilities presentations from some of the companies that you've mentioned that are partnering with us on the Solution Summit, Mike, offer us some closing thoughts, in particular, why you're so optimistic about the future with respect to on-shelf availability. Yes, it's something that the industry's been wrestling with for a very long time, but there is so much innovation right now, and it seems like there's a willingness on the part of retailers to invest in that innovation. So talk a little bit about your optimism as you offer some closing thoughts. And then Emil, I'll ask you to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, Matt. The first thing is there was a perception a while back that brick and mortar is dead. We're never going to have brick and mortar. It's all going to be delivered in an Amazon truck. And it couldn't be farther from the truth, right? There will always be this combination of omni-channel, online retailer only plays like Amazon today, but they're getting, what's interesting is they're opening stores. So I think they understand that there's a correlation between the actual shopper doesn't want to wait for days or 2 days to show up at the door. They want to be able to get what they want when they want it. So brick and mortar is not dead. It's clearly very, very important. Number two, we've mentioned a lot of things about on-shelf availability. Let's just be really clear. You still have to have the right items, the right assortment. It has to be priced correctly. It has to be able to, as Walmart, saving people money so they can live better. And they're actually adding the two, saving people time and money. That's the whole online pickup in store and actually deliver it to your home, et cetera. The retailers who are continuing to reinvent the way they can take care of their customers are going to win in the long run. So from my perspective, that's huge. It's not the only, on-shelf availability is not the only factor by any stretch of the imagination, but it is an important one because if you consistently disappoint your customers after the third time to go after that printer cartridge in the store and you don't have it, forget it. I'm buying it online and I'm not ever going to go back to that store to look for those things again. It is an absolutely important thing from my perspective. Number two, I think the other big piece of this is in a retailer like an apparel company, a Gap, Adidas, 100% apparel kind of companies, you got to really benefit here because technology like RFID can be a single sensor or a signal that can tell you whether you're available or not available, et cetera. The challenging environments are the Walmarts and the Costco's and the Sam's Club, because I've got some products that really lend themselves very nice to things like RFID, apparel and general merchandise and sporting goods. I've also got food products, lettuce and watermelons and canned vegetables, et cetera. So for those solution providers, those retailers, the challenge becomes I got to have a multi-sensor solution. It's got to be computer vision, AI, RFID, 2D barcodes, a whole bunch of stuff working together to be able to answer the same question. It's more complicated for sure, but it's really based upon the categories that you got. So the last thing I'll tell you is we've done a lot of work, already historical work. If you're interested, we've piqued your interest. Obviously, you're investing in this day to find out what the solution providers out there. Go call them up, contacting them. They all have some great solutions. You'll have to figure out for yourself which one's the right one for your business model. But there's a lot of great content that's already out there on Conversations on Retail and the U of A on-shelf availability platform. On-shelf of www.onshelfavailability.com. There's free resources out there. We definitely encourage you to take advantage of those tools in addition to the virtual summit that you're having for today.
Emil, any closing thoughts from you?
So I don't know how I follow that. Mike just traversed the universe there with that, with his closing comments. But, I think at the end of the day, there's really three, things that I would, make folks stay mindful of. One is that data is at the center of all of this. That, when you really think about assembling what Mike just described, that intersection of many different technologies working together, it becomes sort of a supply chain of data. It's how you bring these data sources together to fuel common business practice, right? At the end of the day, 30 years ago, I coined the phrase when I was in a prior life, the data without action is overhead, right? At the end of the day, we're collecting all this information for a specific reason because it enables us to do things more efficiently, in a more complete, and correct fashion. So data is at the center of all of this. The second piece is, as we think about the intersection of physical and digital and this sort of supply chain of data, were sources of inflection points that Mike described in his closing comments, we need to think about how new technology becomes a piece of this puzzle. So things like AI, enabling these things to be done in a fused fashion. So this isn't about taking people out of the process. It's about making people better, right? None of us, if we went back 100 years ago when they started enabling large physical equipment to dig holes, were complaining that it was displacing people from digging the holes. We were celebrating the fact we could dig the holes faster, right? It made the human condition better. So the fusion of AI and these technologies with what we do make us all better. So we need to work to combine those pieces of the puzzle. Yeah, and the last piece of the puzzle to me is to embrace the change. At the end of the day, the retailers and the CPG firms who say to themselves, the consumer is shifting. I'm going to move without the ball to where they need me to be. Kind of to use a sports analogy, you move without the ball, you be in a position to score. Those who move without the ball to where the consumers are going to be and meet them where they're going, those are going to win, whether they're CPG firms or retailers. So at the end of the day, it's leverage data. It's infuse the technology with the people. We're never going to replace the art portion of this with full science, but we can augment it with the technology and the science. And the third piece of the puzzle is, embrace the change. At the end of the day, we've got no choice. We can complain about the change. We can lament about the change. But at the end of the day, change is what makes us better. It's what makes progression, in the industry happen. Many folks would have screamed and yelled about, scanners before they were here. And unfortunately or fortunately, I'm old enough to remember when there weren't scanners in every single one of the stores. Who would want to go to a grocery store today or to any retail store without scanners, right? It makes us better. So all I would leave the audience with is, when we think about on-shelf availability, think about where we can go with this. Think about where the future of this value proposition is and what that opportunity offers you, whether you're a CPG firm or a supplier, or whether you're a retailer or potentially someone servicing them like a sales agency. At the end of the day, this change offers new opportunity, and I'd suggest that everyone should embrace it because it's coming whether we like it or not.
Amo, just one more thing. Beautiful summary of where we are. I'll tell you the one thing, and what's interesting is he just mentioned the scanner. Matt and you and I have talked about this before. The UPC, as we know it, just celebrated its 30th anniversary. Again, it was originally, I'm tired of pricing every single thing. I'll just put a UPC on it and scan it. It's actually celebrating its 30th year. And in 2027, there will be new capability that will eventually eliminate it. It will go by the wayside too, right? It's called the 2D barcode. And you can think about that as kind of looks like a QR code. The ability to store other information other than the item number, the specific manufacturer item number. You can sort when was that product dated, when exactly was that product made available to the customer, potentially serializing it. So you've got two TVs. You could say one is different than the other one. This one's available because it's on the shelf ready for a customer to pick up. This one that's hanging in the ceiling as a demo is not available. There's the same UPC, but you can distinguish available or not. The 2D barcode, look up Sunrise 2027 by GS1. It's a game changer because that's where the industry is going, and there's going to be a lot of potential use cases for basically eliminating something that's been around for 30 years. It's going to get replaced, and it's going to get better, and it's going to take time to get there. But these things will continue to evolve, and more data, to Emil's point, will be a key unlock for a lot of retailers.
Mike, I'm not sure if I'm off of mute at the moment. Matt, if you can hear me, take me off mute for a moment.
You're not on mute.
You're off.
Oh, not on mute. Okay, sorry. I have a little mute button up there on the screen in front of me. Sorry about that. So the one of the things that I think is interesting about your comment and about everything we've been talking about is there's a book of a million years ago that was published that I read when I was earlier in my career. I think it was called The Discipline of Market Leaders. And the only quote I remember from it is that the company that doesn't plan for its own demise will experience it. And I think what we've been talking about here is planning for the industry in that similar fashion. You're not planning for your demise. This isn't a negative thing. It's a taking advantage of growth and progression and opportunity. And your example of the barcode is a great example. It's not that anyone is disappointed in the barcode. It's that we can do better. There are new opportunities for us to embrace, and we need to embrace them. And at the end of the day, we should plan for our own demise, but in a positive fashion. We're looking at a sunrise to these opportunities, not a sunset to the pieces we're leaving behind. We're building. Art Nielsen used to say that we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. So the 2D barcode stands on the shoulders of the barcode that came before it, and of the people who used to be the checkers in the old movies we watch, and and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, we're all better off for it.
Mike Graen, Emil Martinez, thank you both so much for making time to visit with us and help us kick off our first on-shelf availability virtual solution summit. Hope you all have a great day, and let's dig into the presentations.